All right, so we're diving into this whole idea from the Small Shift podcast.
Okay.
And it's this idea that we can tackle huge problems with tiny changes.
Yeah.
It's like instead of trying to climb Mount Everest all at once,
Right.
we're taking these small strategic steps forward.
Yeah.
And I'm all about maximizing efficiency. So I'm curious,
Sure.
what's the most compelling argument they make for this whole small shifts approach?
Well, one of the interesting points I thought they raised is this concept of habit compounding.
Okay.
And essentially what that means is that tiny actions repeated consistently create this snowball effect over time.
Okay.
They highlight some research showing that saving just a few dollars a day
Right.
can lead to significant savings annually, thanks to the magic of compound interest.
Okay, that makes sense for finances. But how does this compounding idea apply to other areas of life, like relationships or even something like creativity?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine if you committed to writing just one paragraph a day. Seems pretty insignificant, right?
Yeah.
But after a year, you'd have a whole novel's worth of material.
Wow.
It's the same principle at play.
Okay.
Those consistent small actions,
Yeah.
whether it's sending a quick text to a friend or practicing a skill for a few minutes each day,
Yeah.
gradually accumulate
Yeah.
and lead to substantial outcomes.
It's almost like those tiny actions are like building blocks. And over time, they create this thing that's much larger and impressive than you initially imagined.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the small shift episode really delves into those psychological mechanisms behind this.
Okay.
They talk about how these small wins actually trigger the release of dopamine,
Interesting.
which is a neurochemical associated with pleasure and reward.
Uh-huh.
And this, in turn, reinforces that behavior, making you more likely to stick with it.
So it's not just about willpower or discipline.
Right.
There's an actual biological basis for why this approach works. That's pretty cool. But I'm guessing it's not always easy to pinpoint those small but high-impact actions.
You're absolutely right. It's not always obvious.
Yeah.
Which is why the small shift emphasizes the importance of identifying what they call the root problem.
Okay.
And they use this example of someone feeling overwhelmed at work.
Yeah.
On the surface, the problem seems like the job itself, right?
Right. But maybe it's not the job.
Exactly.
Maybe it's something else
Precisely.
that's causing it.
Perhaps the root issue is a lack of clear boundaries between work and personal life.
Okay.
Or maybe it's poor time management skills that are leading to constant deadlines and pressure. They argue that once you accurately diagnose that root cause,
Yeah.
you can identify those small targeted changes that are much more likely to address the issue effectively.
So let's say I'm feeling stressed, and I suspect it might be related to my always-on work culture.
Sure.
How do I apply this root problem concept to find a meaningful small shift?
Well, instead of simply trying to work less,
Right.
which can be very vague and often impossible,
Yeah.
you might pinpoint a specific behavior to change.
Okay.
For example, you could set a rule to not check emails after 8 p.m.
Okay.
It's a small shift, but it directly addresses that root problem of those blurred work-life boundaries.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by the need for a complete life overhaul,
Right.
I can start by just tweaking one specific behavior.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the small shift provides several examples of these small, impactful changes. One that stood out to me was this idea of simply making your bed every morning.
Huh.
Seems trivial, right?
Yeah, I'll admit I'm sometimes guilty of skipping that step.
But they cite research suggesting that this simple act can actually set a positive tone for the day,
Really?
promoting feelings of accomplishment and control,
Hmm.
which can have these ripple effects on other areas of your life.
So even a small act like making your bed can influence your mindset and potentially improve other habits throughout the day?
That's the idea. And they back it up with studies on habit formation and the psychology of these small wins.
Okay.
They argue that even these seemingly insignificant actions contribute to building momentum and motivation.
Okay. I'm starting to see the potential here, but let's be honest.
Sure.
Even starting small can feel daunting sometimes.
Yeah.
What about those moments when we just can't seem to muster the energy to make any changes?
Right.
Even tiny ones.
That's where the small shift offers some really practical advice.
Okay.
They acknowledge that resistance to change is completely normal and even expected, and they suggest a few strategies to overcome this resistance.
Okay.
One that really resonates with me is this idea of habit stacking,
Okay.
where you link a new habit you want to form to an existing one.
Ooh. Like if I wanted to start meditating,
Yeah.
I could pair it with my morning coffee routine.
Exactly.
Sip, breathe, repeat.
Exactly. So by attaching that new behavior to something you already do regularly, you're reducing that cognitive load required to actually initiate it.
That's smart. Another strategy they highlight is something called implementation intentions. Implementation intentions.
Yeah, it sounds a bit technical.
Yeah,
But it's actually pretty simple.
okay.
So instead of just setting this vague goal like, I want to exercise more,
Right.
you create a very specific plan.
Okay.
I will go for a 20-minute walk every day at lunchtime.
So it's like removing the guesswork
Yeah.
and making the action as automatic as possible.
Right. It's about turning that intention into a concrete, actionable plan. And the small shift even provides a helpful framework for this.
Okay.
They suggest using this if-then format.
Okay.
If it's lunchtime, then I will go for a walk.
So having that specific plan in place
Yes.
makes it much harder to talk yourself out of it when the time comes.
Exactly. It eliminates the need for decision-making in the moment,
Right.
which can be a huge obstacle when trying to establish a new habit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they emphasize that these strategies are actually backed by research in behavioral psychology. So it adds a layer of credibility to their approach.
It's great to know there's science supporting these techniques.
Yeah.
But what about those times when we inevitably slip up?
Yeah.
You know, life happens. We miss a day or two of our new routines.
Sure
That
is.
mean we failed?
Not at all.
Okay.
The small shift stresses the importance of self-compassion
Okay.
and recognizing that setbacks are just a natural part of the process. They actually quote research from Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg,
Okay.
who found that even one missed instance of a habit doesn't significantly derail long-term progress.
So it's not about striving for perfection.
No,
It's about getting back on track as quickly as possible.
exactly. They even use this analogy of a plane flying from London to New York.
Okay.
So even if it encounters some turbulence and veers slightly off course, it doesn't like abandon the journey.
Right.
It simply adjusts and continues flying towards its destination.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Kind of takes the pressure off. Reminds us that a few bumps along the way are to be expected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the small shift suggests some helpful strategies for dealing with these setbacks.
Okay.
One is to have a plan in place for when you inevitably slip up.
Yeah.
We call it a failure protocol.
So instead of beating myself up for missing a workout,
Yeah,
I could have a predetermined action like doing a quick 10-minute stretch routine
exactly.
or scheduling a makeup session for the next day.
Yeah, having that plan in place removes the need to make a decision in the moment when you're likely feeling discouraged.
Yeah.
And it helps to frame that setback as a temporary detour
Right.
rather than a complete derailment.
It's like you're giving yourself permission to be human,
Yes,
to make mistakes and learn from them.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they emphasize the importance of celebrating those small wins along the way.
Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in focusing on what we haven't achieved yet,
Right.
but taking the time to acknowledge our progress,
Yeah.
no matter how small it might seem, can actually boost our motivation and reinforce those positive behaviors.
You know, I've noticed that in my own life, even something as simple as crossing a task off my to-do list gives me a little surge of satisfaction that helps me power through the rest of my day.
It's those small victories that really fuel our momentum and remind us that we're capable of making positive changes. And the small shift encourages us to get creative with those celebrations.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't have to be anything grand or elaborate.
Okay.
It could be a quick dance break, a moment of quiet reflection,
Yeah.
or even just a mental high five.
I like that.
It's about finding what works for you and making it a conscious part of your routine.
Yeah, I like that.
They also suggest sharing your goals with a friend or finding an accountability partner.
Okay.
Having someone to cheer you on and provide support can make a big difference,
Right.
especially when facing those inevitable challenges.
It's like having a personal cheerleader in your corner, reminding you of your why and encouraging you to keep going.
And sometimes that external support
Yeah.
can be the key to pushing through those moments of doubt and staying committed to our goals.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from habit compounding to implementation intentions to failure protocols to the power of celebrating small wins.
It's amazing how much wisdom
Yeah.
and practical advice can be packed into a single podcast episode.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the small shift,
Yeah.
I'm left with this feeling of like empowerment. It's like they've given us this toolkit for creating positive change.
Right.
And it all starts with like recognizing the power of those seemingly insignificant actions.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most valuable takeaways from this episode
Yeah.
is that it like reframes our understanding of what it means to make a difference.
Right.
We often get caught up in this idea of needing grand gestures or sweeping changes to see real progress.
Yeah.
But the small shift reminds us that consistent incremental progress can be just as transformative, if not more so.
It's like they're giving us permission to ditch that all or nothing mentality and embrace a more sustainable approach to personal growth. No more waiting for the perfect moment or setting these unrealistic expectations.
Right. And they emphasize that this approach isn't about lowering our standards or settling for mediocrity. It's about recognizing that real lasting change often happens in those small, almost imperceptible moments. It's about building a life that's not defined by these grand pronouncements, but by the accumulation of tiny, meaningful choices.
And those choices, those small shifts, they're accessible to everyone, regardless of their circumstances or resources.
I completely agree.
It's a really democratizing idea.
It strips away those barriers we often erect in our own minds, those excuses about not having enough time, money, or willpower. The small shift reminds us that we all have the capacity to make positive changes. It's just a matter of finding those small leverage points that align with our values and goals.
So for our listener out there who's feeling inspired, but maybe also a bit overwhelmed by all the possibilities, what's one concrete step they can take right now to put this small shifts philosophy into action?
Well, I'd encourage them to think about one area of their life they'd like to improve. And then identify just one tiny action they can take today to move in that direction. It could be as simple as drinking an extra glass of water, taking a 5-minute walk, or sending a quick text to a friend they've been meaning to connect with.
And remember, there's no need to overthink it. Or strive for perfection.
Exactly.
Just choose something that feels doable and commit to doing it consistently.
Exactly. And as you embark on this journey of small shifts, remember to be patient with yourself. Change takes time, and it's rarely linear. There will be setbacks and moments of doubt. But as the small shift reminds us, even those setbacks can be valuable learning opportunities.
All part of the process. And by embracing those challenges and celebrating those small wins along the way, we can create this ripple effect of positive change that extends far beyond our initial intentions.
Beautifully put. It's a reminder that even the smallest actions can have a profound impact, not just on our own lives, but on the world around us.
So to our listener, we encourage you to embrace the power of small shifts. Start today, make that tiny change, and watch as those seemingly insignificant actions gradually transform your life.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep shifting.